Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has officially confirmed that it launched a retaliatory missile attacks targeting the US Al-Udeid Air Base in Qatar as the world leaders react to a new stage of regional conflict. Russian President Vladimir Putin denounced the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's provocations in view of its attempts to trigger an arms race in the world. And in Panama, any government protesters in Boca del Toro city face persecution and rights violations by the country's security forces. Hello and welcome to From the South, I'm Ana Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. The Iranian armed forces launched a missile barrage against a U.S. military base in Qatar in response to Washington's strikes targeting Iranian nuclear facilities. Qatari authorities indicate that several explosions were reported in the capital Doha, where the U.S. military base Al-Udeid is located. The Iranian operation comes after the Qatari authorities announced a temporary suspension of air traffic in the country in order to ensure the safety of citizens, residents, and visitors. The U.S. base Al-Udeid in Qatar is the largest in the region and houses a Fort Worth headquarters of the U.S. Central Command and its Air Force. The Al-Udeid U.S. military base in Qatar, also known as the Abu Naglad Airport, is one of the two military bases southwest of Doha and the largest in the entire region. It is host to a Fort Worth headquarters for the United States Central Command, as well as its air forces. The base has been central to past U.S. military operations in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. According to local press reports, the base housed more than 10,000 troops of the International Coalition Forces against the Islamic State and more than 100 operational aircraft. Meanwhile, the Iranian people celebrate the attack by the revolutionary forces of the largest U.S. military installations in the Middle East. With flags of their countries, the citizens celebrate in caravans of vehicles the promised response of Tehran to Washington's aggressions against three of its energy facilities on June 21st. In this sense, they prize the fulfillment of the legitimate defense of the Persian country and were grateful that the authorities did justice in the defense of the national sovereignty. President Pashinyan said on Monday that his country will not leave the aggressions against his country unanswered. In a post on his X account, Pashinyan also affirmed that Iran did not begin the war nor won it, but it will defend with all its might the security and integrity of the Persian nation. On the other hand, the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Qatar, Majed Al-Ansari, condemned Iran's attacks on the Al-Udeid Air Base and said it was a flagrant violation of the sovereignty and airspace of his country, as well as the international law and the Charter of the UN. During his TV show Con Maduro Más, the Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro reiterated his call to international leaders to hold a peace summit against war. The Venezuelan president referred to having delivered letters to Chinese President Xi Jinping, Russian President Vladimir Putin, US President Donald Trump, and other dozens of world leaders and heads of states with the aim of holding a summit led by coordination of international mechanisms such as the Arab League and the BRICS nations. The Venezuelan proposal seeks to, in this way, restore the discussion over the importance of respect to international law in hopes of avoiding the risk of nuclear war that threatens the region and the world and is driven by the colonial aspiration of the Zionist state of Israel. This way, US President Donald Trump, through his social network account, commented on Iran's retaliatory missile attack on the US Al-Udeid Air Base in Qatar. In a post, the US leader detailed, Iran has officially responded to the obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response, which we expected and have very effectively countered. There have been 14 missiles fired, 13 were knocked down, and one was set free because it was headed in a non-direction. Pleased to report that no Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. Most importantly, they've gotten it all out of their system, and there will hopefully be no further hate. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no life to be lost and nobody to be injured. Perhaps Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and I will enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same. Thank you for your attention to this matter. In this context, Iran's representative for the UN's International Atomic Energy Agency said the ongoing situation reaffirms the troubling reality that the agency no longer functions effectively.
The present situation has reaffirmed the troubling reality that the IEA and broader non-proliferation regime established under the NPT is no longer considered functioning effectively by some in upholding its foundational objective and legal responsibilities. The recent unlawful act of aggression has delivered a fundamental and irreparable blow to the international non-proliferation regime, conclusively demonstrating that the existing NPT framework has been rendered ineffective in fulfilling its foundational objective.
Iran Foreign Minister Abbas Araqchi arrived in Moscow on Monday for high-level talks, including a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The meeting comes a day after the United States carried out an unprovoked aggression on Iranian soil, targeting 3 peaceful nuclear facilities. The U.S. aggressions follow more than a week of Israeli attacks, which began on June 13, with the assassination of senior military commanders, scientists, and civilians, prompting Iran to launch a large-scale retaliatory operation. In this context, upon his arrival in Moscow, Araqchi stressed the importance of the visit, noting that these developments have added urgency and depth to the talks with Moscow, including with President Putin, to discuss a joint response to emerging threats and sharing challenges.
The absolutely unprovoked aggression against Iran has no basis and no justification. We have long-standing, good, reliable relations with Iran. For our part, we are making efforts to provide assistance to the Iranian people. As you know, I had a telephone conversation with the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel, with the President of the United Arab Emirates, with the President of your country.
At the meeting, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araqchi held Israel and the U.S. fully responsible for the increasing tensions in the Middle East.
The level of tension is currently increasing due to the unjustified aggression that the Israeli regime and the United States have carried out against Iran. These attacks are against the UN Charter, they violate international laws, and the Islamic Republic of Iran is currently engaged in legitimate self-defense in response to these aggressions. We thank Russia for its very firm and correct positions in condemning these attacks. Russia is acting in the right direction in accordance with international law.
We'll take our very first break, but remember you can join us on our TikTok account as teleSUR English, where you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Stay tuned for more news. Welcome back to From the South. Russian President Vladimir Putin denounced the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's provocation in view of its attempts to trigger an arms race in the world. In a recent speech to military academy graduates, the Russian leader reported that NATO plans to announce the launch of a large-scale program to further increase the alliance's capabilities, adding that to implement it, the military budgets of NATO countries will be increased. For its part, President Putin said that Russia will continue to develop its armed forces as a guarantee of its sovereignty, while informing that extra-regional forces are getting involved in the Middle East conflict.
At the next NATO summit, it is planned to announce the start of a large-scale program to further increase the capabilities of the alliance. To implement it, the military budgets of NATO countries will be increased. Meanwhile, the bloc's members are already spending more on military purposes than all the countries of the world combined. From this, it is clear who is really provoking global militarization and the arms race.
Moving on, over the past 24 hours, the Israeli army has killed at least 39 Palestinians in Gaza in an airstrike as part of its ongoing genocidal campaign in the region. Health sources report that the Israeli army wounded 317 people in various locations throughout the Gaza Strip during the attacks. They also know that several victims are still buried in the rubble and in the streets, and that ambulances and civil protection teams cannot reach them due to Israeli aggressions. Since the beginning of the Israeli occupation aggression on October 7, 2023, the number of deaths in the Gaza Strip has risen to 55,998, and the number of wounded has risen to at least 131,559, most of whom are children and women. In the Gaza Strip, the Hamas resistance movements battle Israeli occupation forces in Tel Aviv midterm. Snipers shot down an Israeli soldier east of the Shuhaya neighborhood east of the city and shelled Israeli army vehicles positioned there. As part of this tone of daily series of operations, the Al-Aqsa brigades released footage of a complex ambush against Israeli military vehicles on the supply line of the Al-San areas east of Khan Yunis. According to statistics, more than 42 Israeli soldiers have been killed since early June. In Palestine, food distribution workers in the same area of Gaza Strip face threats of arrest and violence by the Zionist regime of Israel, aims ban of entry and distribution of basic supplies, cases attends aid centers despite the presence of occupation forces in order to access supplies. It should be noted that Israeli forces keep the border crossing closed and prohibit the entry of international humanitarian aid, leaving thousands of people without access to food and medicine. Meanwhile, the international community continues to press for the opening of humanitarian corridors. In the US, a Colombian University graduate and pro-Palestinian activist Mohammed Khalil, who was jailed after his student protest denouncing the US support to Israel, denounced upon his release the actions of his alma mater.
I'm grateful to be standing freely next to you all. I'm grateful to my wife, Noor, whose support, love, and care has kept me upright. And I'm grateful to every single person who stood by me during this time. I must call the hypocrisy of Colombian University. A university that just 2 weeks ago said that they want to protect their international students. While over 100 years later, I haven't received a single call from this university.
And British police clashed with activists of the Palestine Action Group on Monday as the government moved to proscribe the group as a terrorist organization. Hundreds of protesters gathered at London's Trafalgar Square, waving Palestinian flags and holding handcards as the group's leaders called for an emergency mobilization in response to the government's plans. The Palestine Action protest comes just days after two of its members broke into Royal Air Force Base Norton and damaged two military planes in incidents condemned by members of parliament. Home Security Secretary Yvette Cooper announced she has decided to proscribe Palestine Action as a terrorist group and will lay an order before Parliament next week to make membership and support for them illegal. And in other topics, the President of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, expressed that any ruler of the Mexican Republic must comply with a provision of the Constitution regarding foreign policy. In her usual press conference, the Mexican president answered this after being questioned about her position regarding the genocide of the Palestinian people by the State of Israel, and stressed that this has been condemned by her and her administration. Likewise, the head of state stated that, according to the provision of Article 89 of the Mexican Constitution, each ruler of the nation must follow certain foreign policy guidelines. Moreover, the President stated that Mexico must be guarantor of peace of the self-determination of the peoples and condemn any external harm that might be inflicted of the civilian population. Let's take our last break, but before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Un financial break, don't go away. Welcome back. In Panama, the government protesters in Boca del Toro city face persecution and rivalations by the country's security forces. Protesters report that police forces are arresting and shooting unarmed people and indigenous groups in the country. They also condemn how the government of José Raúl Mulino justifies its repressive measures with alleged acts of vandalism, but the reality is that members of the nation police are the ones committing these actions after taking food from stores and communities. In recent days, a young man was killed while exercising his right to protest, an action that led to the escalation of the Panamanian people's struggle despite the executive's obstacles. Panama's National Civil Protection System reported heavy rains caused landslides and flooding. According to the official report, at least 304 families were affected by more than 30 incidents relating to falling trees, structural collapse, and roof collapses. SINAPOG's Director Omar Smith highlighted the work of the response team, which continues to carry out damage assessments and needs analysis despite the adverse weather conditions. The situation is of growing concern as weather forecasts indicate that more rainfall is expected in the coming days, which could aggravate the risk of floodings and new landslides. We move on. Colombian President Gustavo Petro demanded on Monday the release of 57 soldiers who have been kidnapped by civilians used by armed groups in the department of Cauca. Colombian authorities report that the soldiers were kidnapped while patrolling in the municipality of Tambo, a strategic region in the struggle against drug trafficking. According to a report, about 200 civilians were involved in the abduction, who were used as a shield by the armed groups to carry out a kidnapping and undermine the actions of the security forces. The Colombian president called of the peasants of the zones to disassociate themselves from the illegal groups and to promote dialogue with the state. On the other hand, the Colombian Minister of Defense called the abduction a serious violation of international humanitarian law and human rights.
This is not a simple kidnapping, it is a serious violation of international humanitarian law and human rights. They have also used the civilian population as a human shield, putting the lives of innocent people at risk to prevent our military and police from providing security conditions for the arrival of social investment.
On Sunday, a judge in Tennessee ordered the immediate release of Kilmer Abreu Garcia, a Salvadoran citizen. This ruling further undermines the legitimacy of the United States government in human policies against migrants. Judge Barbara Holmes denied the government's motion to detain the citizen, confirming that he will receive the due process to which he is entitled. As you might recall, the Donald Trump administration expelled the citizen along with more than 200 Venezuelan migrants in collaboration with El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele. The hearing for his release is scheduled for Wednesday, McPartland. And with that, sorry, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other series on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our socials. We're on Facebook, on X, and on Instagram as well. For Telesur English from the South, I'm Marrero. Thank you for watching.